both for me and my clients. And even people that I'm talking to in some of the workshops that I'm running, or just talking to in day-to-day life, it always amazes me at how thematic things happen over time. So when we start talking about something, it starts showing up. So this week, the theme has very much been boundaries. So setting boundaries is something people talk about all the time. How are you going to set boundaries? What are the boundaries you're going to set? How does that look? What are you going to do to put these in place? And who do you need to tell? So everyone talks about that kind of first stage, that first bit. And I'm certainly this person too. I'm like, okay, cool. Well, what are you doing with your time? And who do you need to let know that you've got some new rules? So one of the boundaries that I get my business owners to put in place pretty early on is interrupting time. We do this because as business owners, we spend so much time being interrupted by some certain people often. So often team members, so your employees or your customers and clients and things like that. And so interruptions, and then the flip side of that is what we call fires. So interruptions are things that we could deal with at any time. It doesn't have any urgency attached to it. A fire is, a fire. It's something that needs to be dealt with right now, and it requires your input as the business owner to deal with it. Most things, in my experience, are all interruptions, and we have to start to shift that expectation about how we're going to behave. And so what happens is people come into my world, and the very first things I get them to do is kind of set these boundaries in place with their teams and their customers and sometimes even family members and friends, and they put them in place, and then they don't work. They tell people, they're like, right, this is when interrupting time is going to be, and they put it in place, and they say, it will be at this time on these days, come and see me when you've got a question. And then I jump on a call with them and they go, it's not working. They're still texting me. They're still calling me. They're still emailing outside of those parameters, outside of that boundary. And I'm like, of course they are. Of course they are. Because for most of my people, for years, they have been able to text or message or call or email you at any time of the day and get an immediate response. And so they are very well trained that that's how you operate. And now you're changing that. And so this is true of any boundary. If you have not had a boundary around this stuff for a long, long time, and for some of us as adults, like sometimes it's like 20 or 30 years we've not had a boundary around it. And all the other humans have adjusted to how we work. We've trained them that this is how we work. This is how we run our business. This is how we run our lives. And so I certainly did it. I trained everyone that my answer was yes. If you asked me for help for years, my answer was yes. And when you start saying no instead, when you start saying, here's my boundary and I'm only going to respond to you at this time, they won't like it. Now, first of all, they won't believe you. First of all, they're going to go, yeah, whatever, Sarah, you're still going to help. So they'll keep asking. Now, your job is to calmly, kindly reinforce the boundary and say, thanks for the opportunity. I don't have capacity to do that right now. No, I have to say that a lot. No, I can't help with that. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for thinking of me. I had to repeat it over and over again. If you've put in place interrupting time, you're going to have to ignore the texts and the messages and emails. That's a you thing. You're in control of that until the time you said you would respond. And it's really hard. So none of this is easy because we've got conditioned behaviors too, and we're shifting our behaviors, and we're having to be strong and hold up against other people's conditioned behaviors as well. You can do it. You've got this. It feels very uncomfortable. It has to. By definition, shifting this stuff has to feel uncomfortable because it's outside of what you've been doing for all those years, all those months. So the first thing is you have to calmly, kindly re-communicate those boundaries often. How other people feel about it, that's a them thing. They're responsible for their emotions. You're not. Now, I'm assuming at this point in time that you're not being a dickhead about how you're telling them. I assume you're a nice person and that you're going to tell them kindly and curiously and with compassion, that this is my boundary and this is what's going to happen. So you can't be nasty about it, but I don't think that's you. I think you're probably pretty kind about it. And they're having a reaction to it because it's not what they expected. That they have a reaction to it. They have an emotional reaction to it because they're not getting what they have always got. They have felt entitled to your time, to your energy, to your focus, because in the past, that's what you've given. And that's okay. That's perfectly normal when you start to shift these expectations and these boundaries that people will feel uncomfortable about it too. It is totally okay that they have an emotional response to it. And guess what? That's theirs, not yours. So you have to get quite certain in yourself. Check in with yourself. If you get an emotional reaction to setting a boundary, you're going to want to check in and make sure you are being kind, you are being compassionate and reinforcing it, but you don't have to back away from it. So 1% of this job is saying, here's my new boundary. Here's when you can interrupt me when we're working. Here's where you can come and sell me something. Maybe it's a supplier. Like we had the restaurant, I had to set rules around when the suppliers could come hang out because they used to come when it suited them, but it didn't work for us always. And so we changed the way that looked because it needed to suit my team and us. And they didn't like that because it wasn't convenient for them anymore. That's cool. You can call us. You don't have to drop in. And the same thing with your team is that they're going to have to realign the fact that the moment that they think of something, they're not going to be able to get an answer from you. Or if you're saying, I don't work past these times, and then you don't respond until the next morning and customers have been used to you responding during the evening, that's going to take a little bit of time for them to get used to. So 1% is deciding, and then the rest of it is reinforcing, recommunicating, telling people what that boundary is and how they react to that as a them thing, how they respond to that as a them thing. You do not have to take responsibility for that. I'm not going to tell you this is going to be comfortable, and I'm not going to tell you that this is going to be easy. I am going to tell you that it is going to be worth it. And they will start to see how it's useful for them too. Because you're not setting boundaries for fun. You're setting boundaries, you're setting these new systems in place so that you can be a better business owner and a better leader. I set my boundaries so I could be a better mum, so I could be a better wife. And you're probably the same. So never, ever feel bad about setting your boundaries. And just remember that deciding what they're going to be is the little easy bit, because you know what you should be doing. Then we've got to go down the track of making sure that we're holding the line. I always use this analogy. I have a beautiful woman in my community. She has chickens, and her chickens like to eat her veggie garden. And I always say setting boundaries is like building a coop, building a fence, building a gated community for the chickens, so they can still roam around inside the gates, but they can't eat the garden. And then putting the chickens in there and then not closing the gate. That's what setting boundaries is, without recommunicating, without reinforcing, without holding the line. You are like letting the chickens out because you forgot to close the gate. And that's going to eat your veggies. And then you're going to get pissed off at the chickens for eating your veggies, and it was on you because you didn't close the gate. So big breath. You've got this. You've just got to hold the line. You're doing the right thing for all the right reasons, and you know it. Communicate it kindly, communicate it compassionately, and you will get there in the end. You are doing awesome, and you're not the only one. Anyone out there this week that's setting boundaries is having those challenges. Hold the line. You've got this.